Hello, hello. It is the DE Diva, aka the Delaware blogger, coming to you with episode number 56 on podcasting your purpose. It is a wonderful Wednesday, hump day Wednesday, and today we're talking about podcast script pointers and the coffee mug. Don't quit your daydream. That's right. For years, we've always talked about what I would do if I had the time. Well, with this pandemic, you probably have the time. Are you doing what you wanted to do, what you've dreamt about doing? Because I am loving it. I am creating content on a regular basis. So, this has been what I've always wanted to do, and I am loving it. So, I am not quitting my daydream. So, today's coffee. The big mug. That's right. Wednesday was a busy morning, but let's get started. Podcast script pointers. Now, you know what? That is probably one of the biggest questions or the most frequently asked questions by new podcasters. Do I need a script? Should I write a script? What is a script? Is it the same as show notes? Well, if you're doing a solo podcast, meaning it's just you and your audience, your listeners, that's fine. If you're doing a host, if you're doing an interview style, I always recommend having some sort of script. And I'm talking to the new podcasters. Now, we all know that we have a voice, we have a vision, we have something that we want to share, but sometimes we just get tongue tied. We don't know what we want to talk about, and we can be all over the place. So, having a script, whether it's in front of you, hanging up behind you, is always great to bring you back in. And there are things that you want to include in your podcast script. And the greatest thing about creating a podcast script or show notes, especially as a blogger, is because you can repurpose the content. That's right. You can take the script, you can take those notes, and you can write it in a blog post, which is what I do. You guys know I do that on a regular basis. So take the content from your podcast, take those show notes from your podcast, and turn it into a blog. I had an opportunity to work with a client this week, and we are working on her blog, creating a blog for her podcast. And that was one of the things that we talked about, using the show notes, using what she says is that what she sends to her guests is our Q&As. So I said, take those Q&As, and once those answers are presented on the podcast, use that in your blog post, and then lead people to the podcast so that they can listen more. And it's a great thing because normally you get a bio from your guests, and then you can include that in the blog post as well for SEO, search engine optimization. And you can, again, have them share the post and the podcast with their circle of family and friends, followers, readers, and listeners, thereby expanding your brand, broadening your brand, and expanding your exposure online. So if you are a podcaster, I suggest that you do use a script and or show notes so that you can repurpose that content. And if it's not in a full-blown blog post, it can be placed on your Facebook, your Twitter, and especially in your LinkedIn accounts, especially if you have great guests. So let me just give you a few pointers on creating a script. And whether it is word from word, if you're going to sit there and read it word from word, that's fine. Make sure you build in some time for ad-libbing, especially, again, if you are interviewing someone, because you may ask them a question, they will answer your question, but then they may come up with something else. And you want to be able to pivot to continue that conversation and not try to just stick with what is written on your notes or in your notes. Okay. So create that script. And let me give you what you want to do. You want to create the intro, and let people know what they're coming in to hear. And if whether you're using music, intro, whatever, but introduce yourself. That's that monologue. That's that, I'm going to give you my age, the old time, the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. Yeah, I know I'm old. This was before Jay Leno and before Jimmy Fallon. But he would come out and he would talk about himself. He would talk about what's going on in his life. It's like his monologue. He stood on the X and he give the monologue. So when someone comes to your podcast, introduce your podcast, even if it's the same introduction time and time again, but then also let them know what the show is going to be about and let them know who your guest is going to be before you bring them on. Then you can do a segue into some music, maybe a segue into a sponsorship or an ad or whatever, and then introduce your guest. If you've asked your guest to provide a bio, or you've gotten that bio from their website or their media kit, you can read that as well and then introduce your guests and then ask them to introduce themselves to your audience. And then you can get into your notes, your show notes. What is it that you're going to talk about? If there's a script, and as you're reading it, try to read it naturally. I know it's scary, but take time, breathe, laugh, ad lib. And that's what I always put in my guest notes as well. I have a script I used to send them, and then I would put in there, matter of fact, I have a copy of it. I would put in there ad libbing as well. So they knew that we could, banter back and forth. So that's always great. So have those notes there. Put in there that you're going to do some ad libbing. Speak naturally. Ebbs. There's going to be ebbs and there's going to be flow. So that's one thing. Use your delivery notes to introduce the show and also kind of pause. Give people a chance to digest what you just said. Again, ad libbing. Ad libbing is so fun. It's a great time to make it conversational. Again, this is a conversation. Yes, it is an intimate conversation when you're with the podcast. Your listeners, again, when people pop these earbuds into their ears, they're having that intimate conversation. They're having that intimate relationship, but make it fun, make it free flowing, riffing, go off script if you have to, just kind of make it fun. Now, depending on your podcast theme, if you're not interviewing people, but you're out and about, remember, this is audio. People are not seeing what you're seeing. So if I'm like looking out the window and I see a bird, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a blue bird out there, a red bird out there, the sun is shining, it's raining, what's the weather like? Let people know, give them some visuals. If you're telling them a story, it all depends on the format and the outline of your podcast. If you're a storyteller, set the scene. Don't go too fast and don't go too slow. Again, I love having a conversation. Are you having a conversation and you're the type of person that, your hands are all over the place, you're talking a mile a minute, you got that New York accent going on, whatever. And remember, people are listening. You want them to digest, ingest, and understand exactly what you're saying. So pace yourself. Again, it is great when you're writing out these scripts, but when you're reading them a mile a minute, you're going to throw people off. So again, have those good notes. Allow some time for some ad libbing. Describe the scene if you're outdoors or you're sharing about, an event that's going on. And again, your pace is important. I told you that I used to have a sample podcast script, and this is what I would send them. And this is when I did the Out and About with Antoinette. I would send it to people and I'd say, the Delaware blog or an Anchor FM, the date, I'm going to interview the guest and the title. And I told them that the podcast would be pre-recorded and that I would send the link to their phone via messenger for them to join me at a certain time. And that's how I did my interviews on Anchor FM using the Record with Friends app. But now I suggest that you use Zoom. Set up a Zoom call, and then you can strip away the video and use the audio. You can convert that MP4 into an MP3. So I would say hello and welcome to the Delaware Blogger Podcast here on Anchor FM, where I will be interviewing guests from in and around the state of Delaware who are doing positive things in their communities. Today, my first guest is, and then I would say the guest name, their title, and a description or subject of the podcast. And then I would say, welcome, guests, to the Delaware Blogger Podcast. I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule to speak with me today. And then the guest would say, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here, da, 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 da. And then I even put in here, said, podcast host, begin questions or start a conversation about the subject or the event. So now I'm talking about why I have that guest on or what we're going to be talking about. And then we would continue the conversation. I will respond. I even wrote in here, I will respond and make comments on something that you said with ad-libbing and questions. So then they knew that we were going to go off on a tangent. We weren't going to stick with the script. And then I would give more questions, more answers, more comments. The guests would say what they were going to do. And then at the end, we would close out the conversation. I would always give them the opportunity to provide a CTA. Please tell the listeners how they can connect with you, your email address, or any hashtags to follow so that we can share your vision and garner more support from others. So give them an opportunity. Obviously, they're coming on, they're sharing their content, they're sharing their message, they're sharing their event. Give them an opportunity to share their social media platforms, their email, the telephone number, any links and hashtags that they want used. You'd end up saying thank you to your guests for being a guest here on the Delaware Blogger Podcast on Anchor FM. And this is what I used to like to say. Do you have any last words for us? And this gave them a way to come in, wrap up everything, tie it up in the bow, and leave that information for my listeners. I love doing that. Sometimes they would come back with a quote or a scripture or something, but I love that portion of the show. And again, you would thank them. Again, thank you, guests. I hope you have a wonderful week. May God continue to bless you and your family, blah, blah, blah. And then I would say to my listeners, thank you all for listening to today's Delaware Blogger Podcast on Anchor FM, where I'll be interviewing guests from here and around the state of Delaware who are doing great things in their communities. Again, I introduce the podcast that way. I am ending it that way as well. If you'd like to be a guest on the Delaware Blogger Podcast, send an email to info@ablake Enterprises. Remember, you want to let them know how to connect with you. Leave the email address. And don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest, as well as my blog, delblogger.com. And here I would probably just give them my Linktree ID so that they could get all my information. And then again, thank them once again. Thank you to the guests, and thank you, my audience, for listening. And please share this podcast link with your circle of family and friends. So it was a simple script that I would have, that I would send to my guests so that they knew how the flow of the show was going to go. Hey, that rhymes. So that always helped me. It helped them, and it made it conversational. And before you say, I don't have time for that, let me tell you, there are many, many benefits for creating a script and or show notes, because again, it helps with this flow of the show. It makes it sound better. It doesn't sound forced. You don't forget what you're going to say. It gives your guests a level of comfort. My guests always said, this was great. I felt like I was having coffee with you in the living room, and that was great, or the kitchen or whatever. So that helped them. And again, you can turn your show notes into a blog post or repurpose it in Instagram or LinkedIn or whatever. It's giving you more bang for your buck. So think about, if you haven't done it, make sure that you do. Think about having a script or some sort of show notes that you can repurpose, that you can provide so that you can have. And again, that's a perfect thing to do to promote your podcast. So if you have any questions, if you have any pointers, please leave them in the comments. Please, please, please. But remember, thumbs up this video, subscribe to my channel, share with all your family and friends, and follow me again on all my platforms. Linktree ID is delblogger.com. If you are not listening, you need to listen to Blog Your Way to a Business Profit podcast every Wednesday at 1. It's that tiny URL, Blog to Profit. And make sure, if you're not listening there, you are finding me on Anchor, which is the Delaware Blogger Podcast. On the Delaware Blogger Podcast, it's repurposed content on podcasting. And on Blog Your Way to a Business Profit, it is my blogging tips. My blog, delblogger.com. Subscribe to that. Today is Wednesday. What's today? No, oh my God, it is Thursday. I came in here thinking it was Hump Day Wednesday. Man, y'all didn't even tell me. It is Thursday. Thankful Thursday. What's going on today? Oh, I got a webinar, 1 o'clock. Oop, gotta hurry up. But if you want to, make sure, order your copy. Podcasting Your Purpose Workbook is available on Amazon. And the Basic Blogging Tips for Beginners book is available. Go to dellblogger.com or send me an email and I will autograph it and send it to you. $9.99 free shipping. And online, it's $15.99 on Amazon.com. Check that out. And again, I am so grateful to you guys for supporting me. Make sure that if you have any questions, please, please, please just, leave them in the show notes. See, I got show notes on the brain. Leave them in the comment section. Share this with your family and your friends. Until the next time, stay smart, stay safe, and stay social. Still from a distance, but we're getting there. I'll see you in cyberspace. See ya, it's the DE Diva, aka the Delaware Blogger, and don't quit your daydream. Bye-bye.